A busy festival in Scotland. Two children trotted in the bustling streets. The air filled with the scent of some flavorsome snacks. Beautiful, colorful banners entered their eyesight, and the delightful cheers of the people pierced their ears.
Isn't this wonderful? Everyone's so happy.
Yes, but don't you think it's too loud here? I need some place to rest.
It's not that loud, Al. Also, what if we miss the entire festival?
But it's only for a few minutes.
Jean scratched her head, then scanned the street. Everything was full of life. The snacks and trinkets were selling like hotcakes. Children like them were playing like there was no tomorrow. But then, Jean faced Al. Sweat was gathering on her pale forehead. Looking like she was about to pass out reluctantly, Jean sighed.
Fine, only for a few minutes.
Yay! Now let's find a quiet place.
Can we sit in the street?
But it's too loud here. Look, there's a truck right there.
Alright, let's go there. It's dark here.
And quiet. This is perfect. What's happening here?
Shh! Boys and girls, welcome to the puppet show of a famous play, Macbeth. Kindly take your seats and enjoy the show.
A play? We're getting out of here.
We're only here for a few minutes. Enjoy the play while we're at it.
Fine.
On a heat day in Scotland, three witches, the Weird Sisters, wait to meet Macbeth amidst thunder and lightning. Their conversation is filled with paradox and equivocation. They say that they will meet Macbeth when the battle's lost and won, and when fair is foul and foul is fair. The Scottish army is at war with the Norwegian army. Duncan, the King of Scotland, meets a captain returning from battle. The captain informs them of Macbeth and Banquo's bravery in the battle. He also describes Macbeth's attack on the castle of the treacherous MacDonald, in which Macbeth triumphed and planted MacDonald's head on the battlements of the castle. The Thanes of Ross and Angus enter with the news that the Thane of Cawdor has sided with Norway. Duncan decides to execute the disloyal Thane and give them the title of Cawdor to Macbeth. The Weird Sisters meet on the heath and wait for Macbeth. He arrives with Banquo repeating the witch's paradoxical phrase by stating, "So foul and fair for a day I have not seen." The witches hail him as Thane of Glamis, Thane of Cawdor, and King hereafter. Their greeting startles and seems to frighten Macbeth. When Banquo questions the witches as to who they are, they greeted him with the phrase, "lesser than Macbeth and greater, not so happy yet much happier, and the man who shall get kings, though he be none." When Macbeth questions them further, the witches vanish into thin air. Almost as soon as they disappear, Ross and Angus appear with the news that the king has granted Macbeth the title of Thane of Cawdor. Macbeth and Banquo step aside to discuss this news. Banquo is of the opinion that the title of Thane of Cawdor might enkindle Macbeth to seek the crown as well. Macbeth questions why such happy news causes his seated heart to knock at his ribs against the laws of nature, and his thoughts turn immediately and with terror to murdering the king in order to fulfill the witch's second prophecy. When Ross and Angus notice Macbeth's distraught state, Banquo dismisses it as Macbeth is unfamiliar with his new title. Duncan demands to know whether the former Thane of Cawdor has been executed. His son Malcolm assures him that he has witnessed the former Thanes become named Death. While Duncan muses about the fact that he placed absolute trust in his treacherous Thane, Macbeth enters. Duncan thanks Macbeth and Banquo for their loyalty and bravery. He consequently announced his decision to make his son Malcolm the heir to the throne of Scotland, something that would not have happened automatically since his position was elected and not inherited. Duncan then states that he plans to visit Macbeth at his home in Inverness. Macbeth leaves to prepare his home for the royal visit. Bounding the stumbling block of Malcolm that now hinders his ascension to the throne. The king follows with Banquo. At Inverness, Lady Macbeth reads a letter from Macbeth that describes his meeting with the witches. She fears that his nature is not ruthless enough. He's too full of the milk of human kindness to murder Duncan and assure the completion of the witch's prophecy. He has ambition enough, she claims, but lack of gumption to act on it. She then implores him to hurry home so that she can pour her spirits in his ear. In other words, goad him on the murder he must commit. When messengers arrive with the news that Duncan is coming, Lady Macbeth calls on the heavenly power to unsex me here and fill her with cruelty, taking from her all-natural womanly compassion. When Macbeth arrives, she greets him as Glamis and Cador and urges him to look like the innocent flower but be the serpent under it. She then claims that she will make all the preparations for the king's visit and subsequent murder. Duncan arrives at Inverness with Banquo and exchange pleasantries with Lady Macbeth. The king inquires after Macbeth's whereabouts and she offers to bring him to where Macbeth awaits. Alone on stage, Macbeth agonizes over whether to kill Duncan, recognizing the act of murdering the king as a terrible sin. He struggles in particular with the idea of murdering a man, a relative no less, who trusts and loves him. He would like the king's murder to be over and regrets the fact that he possesses vaulting ambitions without the ruthlessness to ensure the attainment of his goals. As Lady Macbeth enters, Macbeth tells her that he will proceed no further in this business. But Lady Macbeth taunts him for his fears and ambivalence, telling him that he will only be a man when he carries out the murder. She states that she herself would go so far as to take her own nursing baby and dash its brain if necessary. She counsels him to screw his courage to the sticking place and details the way they will murder the king. They will wait until he falls asleep, she says, and thereafter intoxicate his bodyguards with drink. This will allow them to murder Duncan and lay the blame on the two drunken guards. Macbeth is astonished by her cruelty but resigns to follow through her plans. This scene starts with Macbeth alone contemplating whether the weight of the sins and pain the death of the king would cause.
This act should be done quickly to prevent hesitation and mistakes. But the king is well loved by the people. Why did it bring them great pain to find out his highness has been murdered?
He continued to doubt himself until Lady Macbeth entered the room. His conscience soon caught up with him and he told Lady Macbeth to not go on with the plan, but to his dismay, she was persistent and started to argue, yet Macbeth tried to disagree.
I am only doing what is right. The king has done so much for me and this kingdom. It would be a dishonorable act to murder him in cold blood.
This statement shocked Lady Macbeth and she began to show her true ugly colors.
You are a coward. He swore up and down that you will murder the king for the crown. And now as the moment approaches, you decided to back out? Even if it was a baby in my hands who had been smiling at me, I would smash its head onto the ground without remorse if I had sworn to do so as you did.
What if we fail?
What if we fail? Get your courage up. We had planned everything and even a scapegoat for this whole ordeal. When the king is asleep, I will get the guards drunk as they won't be able to defend or remember a thing. And when we have done the deed, we can blame it on them.
This is where things take a turning point. Macbeth has now been fully convinced to kill the king.
Oh, how courageous you are. We can splatter the king's blood and use the guards' daggers to kill as to pin the blame on them.
And soon the plan will play out. Will it work or will it fail against the odds? Find out in the next act of Macbeth.
Banquo and his son Fleance are walking a torchlit hall around Macbeth's castle. Banquo wishes to stay awake because of his nightmares, and give Fleance his sword to do his duty as he's feeling tired. Macbeth enters. Banquo mentions to Macbeth his dream about the three weird sisters. Macbeth claims that he has not thought of them at all since. Banquo and Fleance left the scenes. Macbeth as well part ways and goes into the dark hall. There, he gets a vision of a dagger floating in the air, its handle pointing toward his hand and tip aiming towards King Duncan. He questions whether what he sees is a reality or a dagger of the heat-oppressed brain. He thought he saw blood on the blade, but it's only a manifestation of his unease over killing Duncan. The night is thick with horror, and Macbeth resolves his bloody work. Lady Macbeth makes a bell that signals that the chamberlains are asleep. Macbeth proceeds.
The alcohol I put in their drinks has made me bold. The same liquor that quenched their thirst has fired me up. Listen, quiet. The owl's noise sounds like saying scary goodnight, like the bells they ring before they execute people. Macbeth must be killing the king right now. The doors are open and his drunk servants are such fools for snoring instead of protecting the king. So many drugs were put in their drinks, you can't tell if they're alive or not.
Who's there? What is it?
Oh no, I'm afraid the servants woke up and the murder failed. This would ruin us. Listen to that. I put the servants' daggers where Macbeth would find them. He couldn't have missed them. If Duncan hadn't reminded me of my father when I saw him sleeping, I would have killed him myself.
I have done it. Did you hear a noise?
I heard the owl scream and the crickets cry. Didn't you say something?
When?
Just now.
As I came down?
Yes.
Listen, who's sleeping in the second chamber?
Donalbain.
This is a sorry sight.
That's a stupid thing to say.
One of the servants laughed in his sleep and one cried, "Murder!" And they woke each other up. I stood and listened, but then they said their prayers and went back to sleep.
Malcolm and Donalbain are asleep in the same room.
One servant cried, "God bless us!" And the other replied, "Amen." As if they had seen my bloody hands. Listening to their frightened voice, I couldn't reply amen when they said, "God bless us."
Don't think about it so much.
But why couldn't I say amen? I desperately needed God's blessing, but the word amen got stuck in my throat.
We can't think like that. If we do, it'll drive us crazy.
I thought I heard a voice cry, "Sleep no more. Macbeth is murdering sleep." Innocent sleep. Sleep that soothes away all our worries. Sleep that puts each day to rest. Sleep that relieves the weary laborer and heals hurt minds. Sleep. The main course in life's feast and the most nourishing.
What are you talking about?
The voice kept crying, "Sleep no more." To everyone in the house, Macbeth has murdered sleep, and therefore Macbeth will sleep no more.
Who said that? Why, my worthy lord, you let yourself become weak when you think about things in this cowardly way. Go get some water and wash this bloody evidence from your hands. Why did you carry these daggers out of the room? They have to stay there. Go take them back and smear the sleeping guards with the blood.
I can't go back. I'm afraid to even think about what I've done. I can't stand to look at it again.
Coward! Give me the daggers. Dead and sleeping people can't hurt you any more than pictures can. Only children are afraid of scary pictures. If Duncan bleeds, I'll paint the servants' faces with his blood. We must make it seem like they're guilty.
Where is that knocking coming from? What's happening to me? That I'm frightened of every noise. Whose hands are these? Ha! They're blocking out my eyes. Will all the water in the ocean wash this blood from my hands? No. Instead, my hands will stain the sea scarlet, turning the green waters red.
My hands are as red as yours, but I would be ashamed if I were as pale and weak. I hear someone knocking at the south entry. Let's go back to our bedroom. A little water will clean the evidence of our guilt. It's so simple. You've lost your resolve. Listen, there's more knocking. Put on your nightgown in case someone comes and sees that we're awake. Snap out of your daze.
Rather than have to think about my crime, I'd prefer to be completely unconscious. Wait, Duncan, with your knocking? I wish you could.
A few hours pass, and a drunken porter opens the door to a knocking sound. Macduff comes in and complains about the slow response. Porter explains that he had been drinking until 3 a.m. Macduff could tell when the porter rambled about the effects of alcohol, which he says provokes red noses, sleepiness, and urination. Macbeth had now woken from the knocking, and Macduff asked him if the king was awake, saying that Duncan asked to see him early that morning. In short, clip sentences, Macbeth says that Duncan is still asleep. While Macduff enters the king's chamber, Lennox tells Macbeth about what occurred the previous night. The whole night, he said, there were signs of uneasiness and some kind of disturbance within the house. Suddenly, Macduff comes running back in, shouting in horror and alerting the house that someone had killed the king. Lady Macbeth is shocked that such a crime has happened in her own home. Macbeth and Lennox check the scenes, and as they emerge back, Malcolm and Donalbain arrive on the scenes. They said that their father, King Duncan, has been killed, most likely by his chamberlains. The chamberlains that were now found dead with bloody daggers. Macbeth declares that in his rage he has killed the chamberlains. Macduff questions Macbeth's actions, a bit suspicious, in which Macbeth explains by saying that his fury at Duncan's death was so powerful that he could not restrain himself. Lady Macbeth faints and is taken away. Malcolm and Donalbain kept quiet, as they're the most at risk of danger at the moment. The rest of the men set up an emergency meeting and left the room. Malcolm plans on fleeing to England, and Donalbain plans on fleeing to Ireland, with Donalbain deciding it is best to separate. While other people were talking about the tragic death of King Duncan, Rose and an old man walk outside the castle discussing all the unnatural events that have circled around ever since the king's death. Their daylight was filled with darkness. A falcon was killed by an ordinary owl, and the king's well-behaved horses went wild and ate one another. As both men were conversing, Macduff entered the scenes. He talked about his suspicions on the assassination of the king, that the servants who killed King Duncan were paid by two of his children, Malcolm and Donalbain, for they soon departed the place after the death of their father. Rose was having doubts about Macduff's suspicion. They later move on talking about Macbeth's crowning, who will soon be the next king, and coronation will take place in Scone. Soon enough, the three of them departed. Macduff said he's heading to Fife, while Ross will go to Scone.
Banquo, Macbeth's former friend, suspects that he killed Duncan in order to become king. Macbeth invites Banquo to a feast that night. Banquo had some other business but promised to return in time. The witches foretold that Macbeth will be king and that Banquo's line would eventually sit on the throne. Macbeth didn't want that to happen, so he planned to do a gruesome action towards Banquo. Away from the castle, Lady Macbeth expresses her despair and sends a servant to fetch her husband. Macbeth enters and tells his wife that he too is discontented. He feels that the business with killing King Duncan is not yet complete because there are still threats to the throne that must be eliminated. He also told his wife that he planned something interesting for Banquo and Fleance, and urges her to be friendly and kind to Banquo during this evening's feast, so that he will lower his guard on them.
You there? Are those men waiting for me?
Yes, my lord. They're outside the palace gate.
Bring them in. Being the king is nothing if I am not safe. I fear Banquo. There is something about him that scares me. His mind never stops working. He can act bravely but at the same time safely. He is the only one I fear. Banquo scolded the witches when they first called me king, asking them for his own future. Then they named him the father to a line of kings. They gave me a crown and scepter that I cannot pass on. However, someone outside my family will take these things away from me, since no son of mine will take my place as king. If it is true, then I've tortured my peace and murdered Duncan for the benefit of Banquo's sons. I have become evil, so that they could become kings. But instead of watching that happen, I will challenge fate to battle and fight to the death. Go to the door and stay there until I call you. Wasn't it just yesterday when we last spoke to each other?
Yes, Your Highness.
Then did you think about what I said? You should now know that it was Banquo that made you miserable for so long and not me. I even showed you proof last meeting. I explained to you how you were deceived, thwarted, and the things and people that worked against you. All the things that can convince even a crazy person to say, Banquo did it.
Yes, you explained it all.
I did more than just explaining it, which is why I asked to meet again. May I ask you something? Are you such a forgiving and patient person that you're just going to let him get away with it?
We're men, my lord. Yes, and just like mutts, swimming dogs, spaniels, hounds, mongrels, and wolf dog crossbreeds are all dogs. But if you list the different qualities of those dogs, you can distinguish which dogs are the watchdogs and which are the hunters. It's the same with men. Now, if you occupy some place in the list of men that isn't down at the very bottom, tell me. Because if that's the case, I will tell you a plan that will get rid of your enemy and bring you closer to me. As long as Banco lives, I am sick. I'll be healthy when he is dead. My lord, the world has wronged me, and I am so angrily don't even care what I do. You must know that Banco is your enemy. Yes, my lord. He is my enemy as well, and I despise him. It pains me knowing that he is still alive. But I cannot order for his death because we have friends in common whom I need. So I have to be able to cry over his death in public. That's why I need your help. I have to hide my plans from the public eye for important reasons. We will do what you ask of us, my lord. You are alive. I'm glad. Within the next hour, I will tell you exactly where to go and when to strike. It must be done tonight. Kill Banco and his son Fleance, who keeps him company. Killing Fleance is as important to me as destroying Banco. Each of you should make up your own mind about whether you're going to do this. We will do it, my lord. I will call for you soon. Stay inside the palace. Banco, if your soul will go to heaven, tonight's the night. A light! Here comes a light! That's him! Shush! Let us prepare ourselves. Who blew the light? Wasn't that the best thing to do? There's only one body here. The sun ran away. We failed in half of our mission. Well, that shouldn't be a problem, as long as we told him how much we did right. Let us just tell Macbeth what we had accomplished.
On stage stands a table for a banquet. Macbeth and Lady Macbeth enters as king and queen, followed by Ross, Lennox, lords in their attendants, whom they bid a hearty welcome. As Macbeth walks among the guests, the first murderer appears at the doorway. Macbeth speaks to him for a moment, learning that the murderer has cut Banquo's throat, but his son Fleance has escaped. The news of Fleance's escape scares Macbeth. If only Fleance had died, his throne would have been secured. The snake lies in the ditch. The young snake that escapes in time will be poisonous and threatening, but for now, he has no fangs, says Macbeth. Returning to his guests, Macbeth goes to sit at the head of the royal table while talking about Banquo's absence, saying that he wishes he's late out of rudeness and not of pity mischance. When Macbeth was about to go back to his seat, he saw Banquo's ghost sitting in his chair. Horror-struck, Macbeth speaks to the ghost, which is invisible to the rest of the attendants. As the guests worry for Macbeth, Lady Macbeth makes excuses for her husband, saying that he is often like this since his childhood and that the guests should simply ignore his behavior or else he will get angry. Then she speaks to Macbeth, questioning his manhood and urging him to snap out of his trance. The ghost disappears and Macbeth recovers, telling his company that his behavior is nothing to those who know him well. As he offers a toast to the guests, Banquo's ghost reappears and Macbeth talks to him again, telling him to leave. This behavior angers Lady Macbeth and she kindly asks the worried guest to leave. Macbeth mutters an oath saying of the dead getting revenge and tells Lady Macbeth that Macduff refuses to come to see him when he is commanded. He has heard this indirectly from a servant spy that he has in every lord's household. He says that he will visit the witches again tomorrow in the hopes of learning more about the future and about who may be plotting against him, saying that his safety is the only important thing. He resolves to do whatever is necessary to keep his throne, declaring, I have some schemes in my head that I'm planning to put into action. I have to do these things before I have a chance to think about them. Lady Macbeth says that he needs sleep and they retire to their bed. In scene 5, Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft, meets with the 3 witches. She scolded them for messing with Macbeth without her consent but later on insisted to take over the mischief. But what angered Hecate more is what the first witch did to Macbeth. The first witch complained that he is a spoiled brat that is angry and hateful. Hecate told the first witch that she can make it up to her by meeting Macbeth in the pit of the river in hell in the morning, where they'll tell him everything he wants to know about the future, bring all her charms, cauldrons, and spells. Hecate bid her farewell to catch an important droplet hanging from the moon before it falls to the ground. According to her, after she works some spell on the droplet, it will produce a magical spirit that will trick Macbeth with illusions. This magical spirit is supposed to make Macbeth fall into an illusion that will fool him into thinking that he is greater than fate. He will mock death and he will think that he is above wisdom, grace, and fear. since for all of us, overconfidence is a man's greatest enemy. In scene 6, Lord and Lennox gossiped about the two murders that had happened. They talked about how monstrous it was for Malcolm and Donalbain to kill their gracious father and how this heinous crime saddened Macbeth. Both men praised how Macbeth handled things after everything that had happened. That if he had Duncan's son in prison, which they hoped would not happen because they would find out how awful the punishment would be for those who killed their fathers. Lennox asked the Lord where Macduff was hiding after he failed to show up at Macbeth's feast. The Lord answered that Duncan's son, Malcolm, now lives in the English court. There, the saintly King Edward treats him well despite Malcolm's misfortunes. He's still shown respect. Lord added that Macduff went there to ask King Edward for help. Looks like Macduff wants to form an alliance with the people of Northumberland and their lord, Seward. Macduff hopes that with their help, peace will be restored. Macbeth heard about Macduff's plans, which angered him. Macbeth told Macduff to return to Scotland, but he refused. Lennox said that Macbeth's threat to Macduff will keep him away from the country and wishes him to return quickly to free Scotland from a tyrant.
The three witches circle a cauldron, mixing in variety of grotesque ingredients while chanting.
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble. Ha ha ha.
Hecate joined the three witches and they all circle the cauldron and chant again.
Double, double, toil and trouble, fire burn and cauldron bubble.
When all of a sudden, one of the witch felt a prick on her thumb.
By the pricking of my thumbs, something wicked this way comes. Open locks, whoever knocks.
Macbeth then enters, demanding answers to his pressing question about the future.
Answer me to what I ask you.
Speak, demand, will answer. Say if hadst rather hear it from our mouths or from our masters. Pour in soul's blood that hath eaten her 9 furrow, grease that sweaten from the murderous gibbet throw into the flame. Come high or low, thyself and office deftly show.
The witches complete their magic spell and summon forth a series of apparitions. The first apparition was an armed head that warns Macbeth to beware of the Thane of Fife.
Macbeth, 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 beware Macduff, beware the Thane of Fife.
The second apparition is a bloody child, who tells him that none of a woman born shall harm Macbeth.
Be bloody, bold, and resolute. Laugh to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth.
Then leave, Macduff. What need I fear of thee?
Macbeth was delighted as he heard that news. The third apparition is a crowned child with a tree in its hand, who says that Macbeth shall never vanquish until a great Birnam wood to Hidden Hill shall come against him.
Listen, but speak not to it. Be lion melted proud, and take no care who chafes, who frets, or where conspirators are. Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Birnam wood to Hidden Hill shall come against him.
That should never be. Who can impress the forest, bid the tree unfix his earthbound root? Sweet Buttevant's good, rise, rebellious dead, never till Birnam would rise, and our high-placed Macbeth shall leave the lees of nature, pay his breath to time and mortal custom.
The cauldron sings and a strange sound is heard. The witches now show Macbeth a procession of kings, the eighth of whom holds a mirror in his hand, followed by Banquo. As Banquo points at this line of kings, Macbeth realizes that they are indeed his family line. After the witches dance and disappear, Lennox enters with the news that Macduff has fled to England. Macbeth resolves that he will henceforth act immediately on his ambitions. The first step will be to seize Fife and kill Macduff's wife and children. In Macduff's castle, Lady Macduff approaches Ross, persisting to know why her husband left. Ross replies, telling her to trust her husband's judgment, then leaves. Lady Macduff feels betrayed. Lady Macduff then tells her son that his father is dead, but her son disagrees because if he was dead, Lady Macduff would be crying. They both get into a friendly banter, then they go on to discuss whether or not she should buy a new husband at the market and as well as what happens to traitors. A messenger comes in warning Lady Macduff that she is in danger and that she needs to leave the castle. Lady Macduff protests that she hasn't done anything wrong. A group of murderers enter. They denounce Macduff, but Macduff's son disagrees, calling them a murderer and a liar before the murderer stabs him. Lady Macduff turns and flees, a group of killers hot on her tail. Outside King Edward's palace, Malcolm talks to Macduff, telling him that he doubts him as Macduff left his family behind. He thinks that the Thane of Fife is planning to win Macbeth's favor by betraying the real successor. Even though Macduff admits that he is not treacherous, Malcolm thinks that even a good person might give way to a royal command. To determine whether Macduff is trustworthy, he pretends to admit to be a sinful person, as if pitying himself. At first, Macduff disagrees, but later on proves his loyalty to Scotland, thinking that Malcolm's unfit to be king with what he supposedly confessed. With this, Macduff passed Malcolm's test of loyalty. Ross enters. He has just arrived from Scotland. He urges Malcolm to return to his country. Ross confesses to Macduff that Macbeth has murdered his wife and children. Macduff is crushed in grief. Malcolm urges him to let this anger sharpen your sword. Transform your grief into anger. Don't block the feelings in your heart, let them lose as rage. And Macduff assures him that he will inflict revenge upon Macbeth.
A doctor and a gentlewoman are two newly introduced characters. Lady Macbeth is being observed by the gentlewoman. In her bedroom, Lady Macbeth appeared to be sleepwalking. As a result of this, Lady Macbeth now feels guilt by her previous actions. She tries to get rid of imaginary blood that was in her hands. When she's sleepwalking, she talks about King Duncan's, Banquo's, and Lady Macduff's deaths. The doctor is taken aback by what he discovers and warns the lady to be careful. Lady Macbeth should be watched closely and anything that could be used to harm herself should be removed. Angus, Lennox, and other Scottish soldiers are leading troops toward Birnam Wood. They want to meet Macduff, Malcolm, and their Englishman there. They are all talking about Macbeth's dismal leadership and how he's plainly in it for himself, and not for Scotland. Their aim is to meet up with Scottish soldiers and then overthrow Macbeth. Macbeth enters Dunsin's hall with the doctor and his entourage, boasting that he has nothing to fear from the English army or Malcolm, because none of woman born can hurt him, and that he will rule safely since Birnam Wood does not move. He calls his servant Satan, who confirms that a 10,000-strong English army is on its way to the castle. Even though the battle is still a long way off, Macbeth insists on wearing his armor. Macbeth talks to the doctor about Lady Macbeth's condition. The doctor explains that the lady is not sick in body but sick in mind. Macbeth demands him to cure her. At the country near Birnam Wood, Malcolm talks with the Seaward and his officers about their plan. They plan to cut branches and hide behind it to serve as camouflage as they march to the castle. Outside the castle, the battle begins. Malcolm instructs the soldiers to throw down their bows and draw their swords. On the battlefield, Macbeth strikes those around him vigorously, insolent because no man born of woman can harm him. He slays Lord Seward's son and disappears in the fray. Macduff emerges and searches the chaos frantically for Macbeth, whom he longs to cut down personally. He dives again into battle. Malcolm and Seward emerges and enters the castle. Elsewhere on the battlefield, Macbeth at last encounters Macduff.
Why should I play the Roman fool and die on mine own sword? Whilst I see lives, the gashes do better upon them.
They fight, and when Macbeth insists that he is invincible because of the witch's prophecy, Macduff tells Macbeth that he was not of woman born, but rather from his mother's womb untimely ripped. Macbeth suddenly fears for his life.
I will not yield. to kiss the ground before young Malcolm's feet, and to be baited with the rabble's curse. Though Burnham would become to Dump's name, and though post being of no woman born, yet I will try the last. Before my body, I throw my warlike shield, lay on, Macduff, and down be him that first cries, "Hold, enough!"
They exit fighting. Malcolm and Seward walk together in the castle, which they have now officially captured. Ross tells Seward that his son is dead.
Your son, my lord, has paid a soldier's debt. He only lived but till he was a man, to which no sooner had his prowess confirmed in the unshrinking station where he fought, but like a man he died.
Then he's dead.
Aye, and brought off the field. Your cause of sorrow must not be measured by his worth, for then it hath no end.
Why then? God's soldier be he. Had he as many sons as I have heirs, I would not wish them to a fairy death. So his knell is knolled.
He's worth more sorrow, and that I'll spend for him.
He's worth no more. They say he parted well and paid his court, and so God be with him. Here comes newer comfort.
Macduff emerges with Macbeth's head in his hand and proclaims Malcolm King of Scotland. Malcolm declares that all his thanes will be made earls according to the English system of peerage. They will be the first such lords in Scottish history, cursing Macbeth and his fiend-like queen. Malcolm calls all those around him as friends and invites them all to see him crowned at Scone.
Thank you for watching the performance. Please leave a penny before you go. I can't go home with an empty wallet after showing to all of you such an outstanding performance.
Oh yes, that was great. I hope to see more of your show. Told you we'd enjoy it.
Yeah, right. Macbeth really did King Duncan wrong.
I know. He should have just waited for the right timing for the prophecy to come true, instead of being violently impatient.
Agreed. But Malcolm was also smart in testing Macduff's loyalty by pretending to be a very sinful person like the Tyrant King.
True. Anyways, I'm hungry.
Me too. Let's go before the witches chase us with another wicked prophecy.